The night of December 29th, 1972, witnessed a tragedy that would forever be etched in aviation history. It was a night that would change the lives of many and leave an indelible mark on the aviation industry. Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a Lockheed L1011 TriStar, was on its final descent into Miami International Airport. The aircraft, a marvel of modern engineering, was considered one of the safest of its time. The flight, carrying 163 passengers and 13 crew members, had originated from New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. The passengers, a mix of holiday travelers and business professionals, were looking forward to reaching their destination. As the plane approached the Florida Everglades, the serene landscape below, with its vast stretches of swamp and wilderness, would soon become the site of a horrific accident. A seemingly minor technical issue with the landing gear indicator lights spiraled into a fatal chain of events. The crew's attention was diverted to the malfunctioning light, a small bulb that failed to indicate whether the landing gear was properly deployed. The crew, preoccupied with the landing gear problem, failed to notice their gradual descent. In the dimly lit cockpit, the pilots were engrossed in troubleshooting, unaware that the autopilot had been inadvertently disconnected. The TriStar, its altitude waning with every passing second, slammed into the dark, unforgiving swamp. The impact was catastrophic. The once majestic aircraft was now a twisted wreckage, submerged in the murky waters of the Everglades. Of the 176 souls on board, only 75 survived the crash. The survivors, many of them injured, were left to fend for themselves in the harsh conditions of the swamp until rescue teams arrived. The crash of Flight 401 sent shockwaves through the nation. News of the disaster spread quickly, with headlines and broadcasts capturing the horror and disbelief of the public. It became one of the deadliest aviation accidents in US history at the time. The incident prompted a thorough investigation by aviation authorities, who sought to understand how such a tragedy could occur. The tragedy plunged the families of the victims into mourning. Memorial services were held, and communities came together to support those who had lost loved ones in the crash. It also left a scar on the aviation industry, prompting investigations and raised airline safety protocols. The findings led to significant changes in cockpit procedures and training, aimed at preventing such a disaster from happening again. But the story of Flight 401 didn't end there. In the months and years that followed, the crash site and the aircraft itself became the center of eerie tales and ghostly encounters. In the wake of the disaster, something strange and unsettling began to occur. Crew members and passengers on other flights reported seeing apparitions of the deceased crew, particularly the flight engineer Don Repo. Whispers of unusual occurrences, of spectral sightings, began to circulate among airline staff. These stories, initially dismissed as mere superstition, gained credibility as more and more people came forward with their experiences. What began as hushed rumors would soon evolve into a chilling saga, intertwining tragedy, speculation, and the paranormal. Paranormal investigators were drawn to the case, seeking to uncover the truth behind the ghostly sightings. The crash of Flight 401 was a sobering reminder of the fragility of life and the unforgiving nature of human error. It underscored the importance of vigilance and the need for constant improvement in aviation safety, but the eerie events that followed would add a chilling new dimension to the tragedy, transforming it from a mere accident into a haunting legend. The story of Flight 401 remains a poignant chapter in aviation history, a blend of sorrow, mystery, and the supernatural. The first whispers of strange occurrences began to surface not long after the crash. It started as hushed conversations among the crew members, a mix of disbelief and curiosity. They emerged from the cockpits and galleys of Eastern Airlines, whispered among pilots and flight attendants. These were not just idle gossip or the usual banter that filled the long hours of flight. These weren't tales of grief-stricken relatives or survivors haunted. No, these were accounts of something far more unsettling. Sightings of the deceased crew members of Flight 401. The stories were chilling, yet strangely compelling. Captain Robert Loft, a seasoned pilot known for his calm demeanor, and flight engineer Don Repo, a meticulous professional, were among those said to have returned. Their presence was felt in the very aircraft they once commanded. Their spectral forms were reportedly seen on other Eastern Airlines flights, particularly those that utilized parts salvaged from the wreckage of Flight 401. It was as if the remnants of the ill-fated flight carried with them the spirits of the lost crew. One of the earliest reported sightings came from a senior Eastern Airlines captain. His account was detailed and vivid, leaving little room for doubt. He claimed to have seen Don Repo sitting in the jump seat of his aircraft. The sight was so unexpected that it took him a moment to process what he was seeing. The captain, a close friend of Repo's, was reportedly startled by the apparition. He described the encounter as both eerie and comforting, seeing a familiar face in such an unfamiliar context. Repo, he said, appeared as real as day, even engaging in a brief conversation about a technical issue with the aircraft. The exchange was brief, but left a lasting impression on the captain. The apparition then simply vanished. It was as if Repo had come to deliver a message and then returned to the other side. Word of these sightings spread through the airline like wildfire. The stories were shared in break rooms, during layovers, and even made their way into official reports. What began as isolated incidents soon transformed into a wave of similar accounts. The frequency and consistency of these reports made it hard to dismiss them as mere hallucinations or stress-induced visions. Pilots and flight attendants, many of whom had known Loft and Repo personally, reported seeing their familiar faces on flights. The sightings were not limited to one or two individuals but spanned across various crews and flights. The apparitions were often seen performing routine flight checks or assisting with passenger service. It was as if they were continuing their duties from beyond the grave. These sightings, though unsettling, were often described as benevolent. The spectral crew members seemed to be looking out for their colleagues and passengers, ensuring that everything was in order. The spectral crew members seemed primarily concerned with ensuring the safety and smooth operation of the flights. Their presence, though ghostly, was a reminder of their dedication and commitment to their roles, even in the afterlife. As the reports of ghost sightings grew, so did the search for an explanation. One theory that gained considerable traction was the salvage theory. After the crash, Eastern Airlines salvaged usable parts from the wreckage of Flight 401. This was a common practice in the aviation industry, intended to reduce costs significantly. However, some believed that this salvaged hardware, particularly the electronic components, might have inadvertently carried something else from the crashed plane: the spirits of the deceased crew. Proponents of this theory argued that the spirits of Captain Loft and flight engineer Repo might have become somehow imprinted on the salvaged parts. They speculated that the traumatic nature of their deaths, coupled with the sudden shock of the crash, could have created a kind of psychic residue, clinging to the physical objects. This theory, though lacking scientific evidence, resonated with many. It offered a tangible link between the deceased crew and the sightings, suggesting that the spirits were not intentionally haunting the airline, but were perhaps drawn to the familiar components of their final flight. Among the numerous reported sightings, a few stand out for their chilling details. These stories have been passed down through the years, becoming part of the eerie folklore that surrounds the aviation industry. One particularly eerie incident involved a flight attendant on a flight from Miami to Atlanta. This flight, like many others, was routine until the unexpected happened. As she was preparing the galley for meal service, she noticed the reflection of a man in the oven door. The reflection was so clear that she initially thought it was one of her colleagues. When she turned around, expecting to see a colleague, she was met with an empty galley. The sudden realization that no one was there sent chills down her spine. Unnerved, she continued her work, but the face in the oven door reappeared. This time it was even clearer, and she could make out distinct features. This time she recognized the reflection as that of Don Repo, the deceased flight engineer of Flight 401. Repo had tragically died in a crash, and his ghost was rumored to haunt the airline's planes. The flight attendant, visibly shaken, immediately informed the captain of her experience. She described the apparition in detail, hoping for some logical explanation. The captain, familiar with the rumors circulating within the airline, tried to calm her nerves, but the incident left a lasting impression. He knew that many crew members had reported similar sightings. Another notable sighting involved a seasoned pilot who claimed to have seen Captain Loft's apparition in the cockpit. Captain Loft was another crew member who had perished in the same tragic crash as Don Reaper. The pilot, preparing for takeoff, noticed a figure standing in the first officer's seat. At first he thought it was his co-pilot, but the figure's appearance was unsettling. The figure, he said, was the spitting image of Captain Loft, complete with his signature captain's hat and a look of concern etched on his face. The apparition seemed to be trying to communicate something urgent. The apparition reportedly pointed at a panel of instruments, then vanished. The pilot was left in a state of shock, unsure of what he had just witnessed. The pilot, though shaken, had the presence of mind to abort takeoff and have the aircraft inspected. His decision was driven by the eerie warning he had just received. To his surprise, the mechanics discovered a critical malfunction in the very system that the apparition of Captain Loft had indicated. The malfunction could have led to a catastrophic failure during the flight. The timely intervention attributed to the ghostly warning likely saved the lives of everyone on board. These stories, while chilling, serve as a reminder of the mysterious and unexplainable events that sometimes occur in the world of aviation.